The phone rang at 3:14 in the afternoon, a shrill, invasive sound that cut through the gentle silence of the nursery. I was on my knees, my 8-month pregnant belly, a heavy, precious weight resting on my thighs as I carefully folded a tiny lemon yellow onesie. The fabric was so soft, like holding a piece of sunlight. I was smiling, lost in a daydream of my son's tiny fingers and toes, imagining the warm, milky scent of his skin. Then the phone screened again. Shattering the peace, I hoisted myself up with a grunt, one hand braced against the small of my back. A familiar ache these days. I answered on speaker, without even glancing at the screen, my voice still laced with the softness of my daydream. Hello? The voice that answered didn't belong to anyone I knew. It was a man's voice, deep and layered with a sterile, official tone that made the fine hairs on my arms stand to attention. Mrs. Thorne, Elara Thorne. Yes, speaking, I said, my smile fading. This is the Georgia State Patrol. Your husband, Julian Thorne, has been involved in a serious single-vehicle accident on I-75, just north of the city. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The little yellow onesie slipped from my numb fingers, fluttering to the floor like a fallen leaf. An accident. My mind scrambled, trying to picture his car, his face. Is he okay? The words were a fragile thread, threatening to snap. The pause on the other end of the line was an eternity. A vacuum sucking all the sound from the world. He's alive, ma'am. He's been transported to Northside Hospital. But the officer hesitated. And that single word, but, hung in the air between us, swollen with a terrible unspoken weight. He wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. The phrase echoed in the hollow of my skull. Of course, he wasn't alone. He was probably with a client from the architectural firm, driving them to a site visit. Julian was a partner, always working, always charming. That's what I told myself. It was the only story that made sense. Who was he with? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We don't have those details in the preliminary report, ma'am. Just that the female passenger has also been admitted. You need to come to the hospital immediately. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone still clutched in my hand, staring at the little yellow spot on the floor. He wasn't alone. The echo was changing, twisting into something darker, something with sharp edges. A tremor started deep inside me, a subtle vibration that quickly traveled to my hands, making them shake. I leaned heavily against the changing table, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. It wasn't a client. I felt the truth of it in my gut, a cold, sinking certainty. This was something else entirely. I moved on autopilot, my body operating without any conscious instruction from my reeling mind. I snatched my purse and car keys from the bowl by the door and left the apartment. The door slamming shut behind me with a finality that echoed in the empty hallway. I didn't even think to lock it. In the elevator, my own reflection in the polished metal doors startled me. A pale, Wide-eyed woman stared back, a stranger with panic etched into her features. My enormous belly, which I usually saw as a beautiful shield, now looked like a vulnerability, a fragile globe protecting a life that was suddenly, terrifyingly uncertain. The tears came then, hot and silent, streaming down my face as I drove through the rain-slicked streets of Atlanta. Every red light was a personal torment. Every slow-moving car in front of me felt like a deliberate obstacle placed by a cruel universe. A trooper's words were a drumbeat in my head, keeping time with the frantic pulse at my temples. He wasn't alone. Northside Hospital was a jarring world of fluorescent lights, beeping machines, and the sharp, clean scent of antiseptic that clawed at the back of my throat. I approached the reception desk, my heart hammering against my ribs so violently I thought they might crack. "My husband," I managed, my voice trembling. "Julian Thorne. He was in an accident." The receptionist, a woman with kind eyes and a weary posture, typed his name into her computer with a deliberate slowness that was agony. "He's in the ER, hallway C. You can speak to the charge nurse at the station at the very end." I thanked her, my voice thick, and began the long walk down the corridor. I felt the weight of strangers' gazes, their pitying looks for the very pregnant, very desperate wife. Each step was a monumental effort. As if I were wading through wet concrete, the hallway seemed to stretch on forever, a tunnel of suffering leading to an unknown conclusion. At the nursing station, a woman with a no-nonsense expression and a stethoscope around her neck was waiting. As if she'd been expecting me. "Ilara Thorne?" I just nodded, my throat too tight for words. "Your husband is stable. He has a concussion and a fractured wrist, but he is conscious. The doctor will be with you shortly." A wave of relief, so potent it was dizzying, washed over me. Alive, conscious. My knees buckled, and I had to grip the cold Formica counter to keep from collapsing right there. I took a deep, shuddering breath. And the other person? One who was with him. The nurse's eyes flickered for just a second. A flash of something. Pity, understanding, warning, crossed her face before her professional mask slid back into place. "His companion is in the next bay. She sustained minor injuries." Companion, the word felt wrong. Too intimate, too vague. It hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. The nurse handed me a clipboard with a form. "I need you to fill this out for him, please." My hand was still unsteady as I took the pen. My eyes, however, were drawn not to the blank lines, but to the top of the page. There, in the hurried scrawl of a medical professional, was my husband's information. "Patient Julian Thorne, Bay 12. And just below it, companion Sloan Mercer. The name hit me with the physical force of a blow to the chest. All the air rushed from my lungs in a single silent whoosh. It couldn't be. Sloan Mercer, the woman from 3B, the vibrant, impossibly fit yoga instructor with the infectious laugh, and the seemingly devoted husband, Leo, the same Sloan who had just last week brought over a basket of organic, honey-sweetened muffins, sitting at my kitchen island and placing a warm, sympathetic hand on my swollen belly. "You're going to be the most amazing mother, Ilara," she'd said, her eyes sparkling with what I had mistaken for genuine admiration. "I just know it." The clipboard slipped from my numb fingers, clattering against the linoleum floor with a sound like a gunshot. The rhythmic beeping of heart monitors, the distant page for a doctor, the muffled cries from another room. It all melted into a high-pitched, distant buzz. I brought a hand to my belly, a primal protective gesture, and my legs simply gave out. I collapsed right there in the middle of the bright, sterile hallway. My world reduced to 2 words written on a form. Sloane, the neighbor, the friend, the other woman. The floor was shockingly cold and hard beneath my knees. For a long moment, that was all I could process. A chill seeping through my jeans, the dull pressure on my bones. It was a bizarre anchor in a reality that was rapidly disintegrating around me. The nurse was at my side instantly, her voice laced with concern, cutting through the static in my head. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can you hear me?" Strong hands gripped my arms, helping me to my feet. I was guided to a hard plastic chair against the wall, my body moving like a marionette. I sat, but I felt completely detached from myself, a hollow vessel filled with the leaden weight of betrayal. Sloane Mercer. The name was a poison, seeping into my memories, reconfiguring every single interaction. The unexpected drop-ins to borrow a cup of sugar, the chats in the elevator where she'd always find a way to ask about Julian. "He works so hard, poor thing. You're so lucky to have such a driven man." The words were just always, which had once felt like friendly solidarity, now sounded like a calculated, venomous mockery. The sharpest memory surfaced, razor-edged and cruel. A building potluck on the rooftop a month ago. I was seated, exhausted, while Julian was by the grill, laughing with the other men, a bottle of craft beer in his hand. Sloane had glided over, sinking into the chair beside me and placing a familiar hand on my stomach. "May I?" she asked. Her voice sweet as syrup, and then, locking her intense gaze with mine, she'd said, "This bond, it's everything, isn't it? A mother and her child. It's a connection nothing in this world can ever break." Sitting in that hospital chair, I understood the profound, gut-wrenching depth of her lie. This wasn't just an affair. It was a performance, a cruel theatrical piece staged in my own home, with me as the oblivious audience. She didn't want to be my friend. She wanted a front row seat to the life she was systematically helping to destroy. Every question, every piece of advice, every sympathetic smile, it was all intelligence gathering, a way to measure her own success in shattering my world. A young doctor with wire-rimmed glasses and a solemn demeanor appeared in front of me. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm Dr. Evans. Your husband is out of danger. A fracture is a clean break, and the concussion appears mild. He was very lucky." The word was a bitter pill, lucky to be alive to face the carnage he had created. "Can I see him?" I asked. My voice, a stranger's, flat and cold. The doctor hesitated, his professional composure flickering. "He's a bit groggy, and the other patient is in the same observation bay for monitoring. Perhaps it would be better to wait." "No," I interrupted, a sudden steel-like firmness solidifying within me. "I want to see him now." Dr. Evans studied my face. He saw the prominent belly, the pale skin, the eyes that were dry but held a gathering storm. He gave a curt, reluctant nod. "All right, this way." The observation bay was separated from the main hallway only by a faded blue curtain. The doctor pulled it back, and the scene unveiled itself, a tableau of my worst nightmare. 2 beds, side by side. On the right, Julian. His left wrist was encased in a white splint, his handsome face scratched and pale, his eyes closed in a drug-induced sleep. Even unconscious, he looked guilty. In the bed on the left, less than 6 feet away from him, was Sloane. A small bandage was taped to her forehead near her hairline. She wasn't sleeping. She was staring at the ceiling, her eyes wide and glassy, lost in her own private world of consequence. She didn't see me enter. I froze in the entrance, a statue carved from ice. The air in the room became thick, heavy, difficult to pull into my lungs. There they were, the living, breathing proof of the lie that had become my life. The man I shared a bed, dreams, and a future son with, and the woman who had brought me muffins and false friendship, the intimacy of their shared space. This medical purgatory was more devastating than any confession. They were a unit, bound by this secret, and I was the outsider, the piece that no longer fit. And then Sloane slowly turned her head. Her eyes, unfocused at first, found mine. The recognition was instantaneous, followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated panic that contorted her pretty features. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. She looked like a trapped animal, gasping in the truth she could no longer escape. The fear in her eyes was ugly, stripped of all its usual charm. In that moment, I didn't see the smiling neighbor, the compassionate friend. I saw a cornered predator. I didn't look away. I held her gaze, feeling a cold, sharp power rise up within me, pushing aside the tears, the despair, the screaming pain. There was only a brutal, crystalline clarity. I took one step into the room and then another. Each movement felt deliberate, weighted. I stopped at the foot of Julian's bed, my eyes never leaving Sloane. "He wasn't alone," I said. My voice was low, but it seemed to suck all the sound from the room. I was giving the trooper's words back to her, returning them to their source. The phrase hit her like a physical slap. She flinched, shrinking back into her pillows, her gaze dropping to her hands as if she could hide there. "Laura, she began, her voice a broken whisper. "No," I cut her off, my tone frigid. absolute. Don't you ever say my name again. The silence that followed was broken only by the relentless, rhythmic beep of Julian's heart monitor, a mechanical sound marking the seconds of my new, terrible reality. I finally turned and looked at my husband, the man I loved, the father of my child. His face, even in repose, was the face of a stranger. Every feature I knew so well, every line I had traced with my fingers, was now stained by his deceit. I reached out a hand, but stopped inches from his cheek. I no longer had the right to touch him. What we had, what I thought we were building, had shattered on I-75, inside his car, with my neighbor in the passenger seat. I pulled my hand back, my body rigid. The adrenaline that had sustained me was beginning to ebb, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. My belly felt like a stone, and a sharp, cramping pain in my lower back made me catch my breath. And then my son moved, a strong, deliberate kick, as if protesting the anguish that surrounded him. I placed my hand on my abdomen, a gesture of alliance, of protection. In that instant, I knew it was just the two of us now. Just us. We showed her the immaculate nurseries, the fully stocked pantry, the pediatrician records. We explained our co-parenting agreement, our legal partnership, the stability we had fought to create. We presented a united front. But inside, I was crumbling. This was the one threat I had never anticipated. This wasn't about money or custody. It was an attack on our very right to be a family. The investigator left after an hour, her expression giving nothing away. "We'll be in touch," was all she said. The door closed, and the silence she left behind was deafening. Leo sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Sloane wouldn't go this far, would she? "She's desperate," I whispered, my voice shaking. "And we have everything she thinks she's lost." The next few days were an agony of waiting. The shadow of the state hung over our sunny home. Every time the phone rang, we jumped. Every knock at the door sent a jolt of fear through us. We were living in a gilded cage of our own making, terrified that an outsider would deem it unfit. I called Bea Vance. Her fury was a controlled, professional burn. "This is a common tactic in high-conflict cases," she said, her voice like sharpened steel. "We will respond with overwhelming evidence of your stability. We will bury them in paperwork. We will get character references from your pediatrician, your neighbors, your pastors. We will turn this malicious act into proof of your fitness." We did everything she said. We became a factory of respectability. But the fear was a stain that wouldn't wash out. It was the fear that our beautiful, chosen family could be torn apart by a single poisonous lie. The letter arrived 1 week later. It was on official letterhead. Leo brought it in from the mailbox, his hand trembling. He didn't open it. He just held it out to me. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs. This was it, the verdict on our lives. With a deep breath, I tore it open. My eyes scanned the formal language, searching for the words that would break us. Investigation is now closed. No evidence of neglect or endangerment found. The household, while non-traditional, appears to provide a stable and nurturing environment. Case dismissed. The paper fluttered from my numb fingers. Leo caught it, his eyes racing over the words. A sound escaped him, a hybrid of a sob and a laugh. He stumbled forward and wrapped his arms around me, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. We stood there in the hallway, clinging to each other, two survivors who had just faced down the greatest threat to their ship and found it, against all odds, still miraculously afloat. The unseen crack that Sloane had tried to exploit had not broken us. Instead, the pressure had fused us together, stronger and more unbreakable than ever. We had not just been investigated, we had been vindicated. 5 years later, the oak tree in the backyard had seen its share of adventures. Its sturdy lower branches were worn smooth from the grip of small ... eager hands, and a tire swing now hung from its strongest limb, a gift from Leo for the boy's 5th birthday. The sound that filled the air on this golden Saturday afternoon was not one of tears or whispered fears, but of unrestrained, joyful shrieks. Alexander, all boundless energy and scraped knees, was chasing Ben around the trunk of the tree. Ben, quieter and more strategic, was deftly dodging, a mischievous grin on his face. They were a study in contrasts. Alexander with his dark, unruly curls, a miniature of the father he never saw. Ben with his lighter hair and thoughtful eyes, the image of Leo, but in their laughter, in their shared secret language of brotherhood, they were undeniably, beautifully the same. I sat on the back porch steps, a glass of iced tea in my hand, watching them. The ghost of the DFCS investigation, the sharp sting of Sloane's betrayal, the hollow ache of Julian's. They were all distant memories now, faded photographs in an album I rarely opened. They had no place here, in the sun-dappled light of this yard. The screen door creaked open, and Leo stepped out, holding 2 dripping popsicles. He handed one to me and sat down beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. It was a comfortable, familiar contact, a kind built over thousands of shared sunrises, skinned knees, and quiet evenings. "Ben's getting faster," I observed, nodding toward the chase. "He's going to outmaneuver Alex one of these days." Leo smiled, a deep, contented crinkling around his eyes. He's a strategist. Like his old man, Alex is all heart and momentum. Like his mom, our sons, our boys, the legal documents, the co-parenting agreement, the meticulously drawn lines, they had all melted away into the simple ball. Profound reality of this life. We were not 2 separate entities coexisting. We were a family. Julian had faded into a non-entity, a child support payment that arrived with monotonous regularity, and a birthday card that Alexander glanced at with polite disinterest before running back to his toys. A unit. Sloane was a presence on the periphery, a mother Ben saw on alternate weekends and spoke of with a casual fondness that held no power to wound. She had found a fragile peace, and in doing so had lost her power to disrupt ours. Leo and I had never married. There had been no grand romance, no sweeping passion. What we had built was something different, something sturdier. It was a deep, abiding love forged in shared survival, a partnership built on mutual respect, and a friendship that was the bedrock of our entire world. We were the architects and the guardians of this little universe, and it was more fulfilling than any fairy tale. Remember, Leo said softly, his gaze also on the boys, when we thought the hardest part was getting through the next hour? A laugh, easy and light, escaped me. I remember thinking this was a business proposition. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Turns out it was the best investment I ever made. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. We sat in silence for a long while, watching our sons play under the tree we had chosen for them, in the yard we had fenced for them, in the life we had built for them. Alexander, breathless, finally collapsed on the grass, pulling Ben down with him in a giggling heap. They lay there, side by side, looking up at the leaves, their little chests rising and falling in unison. Ben pointed up at the sky. "Look, a cloud that looks like a dragon." "No, it's a spaceship," Alexander countered, his voice full of conviction. Their debate, earnest and ridiculous, was the only sound that mattered. It was the sound of a promise kept, the sound of a home. Leo squeezed my shoulder. "We did good, Alara." I looked at our sons, at the man beside me, at the garden we had grown from a field of ashes. The past held no power here. It was just fertilizer for the beautiful, resilient, unexpected life we had created. "Yeah," I whispered, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. "We did." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn. But the light inside us, the light we had built together, burned brighter than ever. It was just the beginning. This life isn't the one I planned. It's messy and unconventional, and built on a foundation of scars. But it is ours, and it is more powerful, more joyful, and more real than anything I could have imagined. If you're listening to this, if your world has shattered and you're standing in the rubble wondering how you'll ever breathe again, I want you to hear this. The end of one story is never the end of your story. Your pain is not the final chapter. You have a strength inside you that you cannot even fathom yet. You can take those broken pieces and you can build something new, something stronger, something uniquely and beautifully your own. It won't be easy. There will be days that feel impossible, but you can do it. One breath, one step, one brick at a time. Your new life is waiting for you to build it. If this story gave you a flicker of hope, then do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and rebuilding. Share this with one person who might need to hear this message today. And leave a comment below telling me one small thing you're rebuilding in your own life. Because every story of survival has the power to light the way for someone else lost in the dark. Thank you for listening. Now go build your beautiful, unexpected life. Julian's presence, now conscious, shifted the dynamic of the room. Leo spun toward him, a new, more tangible target for his rage. "You," Leo snarled, the word loaded with so much venom it seemed to poison the air. "You sat at my table. You drank my whiskey. You shook my hand." He took a step closer to the bed, his fists clenched. "And all that time, you were with my wife." Julian tried to push himself up, but the pain in his wrist and the dregs of the sedative made him fall back with a grimace. "Leo, calm down. Let's talk about this." He used that tone, the smooth, placating cadence of a man used to negotiating his way out of trouble. But here, in this context, it was the worst thing he could have done. It sounded pathetic, insulting. "Talk?" Leo let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "There's nothing to talk about. The scene here does all the talking for me." He turned his back on Julian, his focus returning to the source of his pain, his wife. "It's over, Sloan. It's done. Pack your things. Don't come home." It was then that Sloane's desperation reached its peak. The threat of losing everything, her husband, her home, her comfortable life, made her play her last, most terrible card. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice strident, clawing at the silence. "Leo, you can't. I'm pregnant." The silence that crashed down was absolute, so deep and profound that the monotonous beep of the heart monitor seemed to scream into the void. Leo froze, his head turning slowly toward her, his expression one of total, uncomprehending disbelief. In the other bed, Julian's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. He hadn't known. This was a part of the secret Sloane had kept even from him. I closed my eyes for a single, painful second. So it was true. My sickening suspicion had been confirmed in the most brutal way possible. I felt the floor sway beneath me, but my body remained rigid, held upright by a fresh wave of cold adrenaline. I was watching the final act of this tragedy, and it was more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. Leo's eyes dropped to Sloane's belly, then snapped back to her face. His mind was working furiously, trying to process this nuclear bomb of information, trying to fit it into the timeline of her betrayal. "Pregnant," he repeated, the word foreign and toxic on his tongue. A flicker of something that might have been joy in another lifetime shone in his eyes for a nanosecond. But it was instantly extinguished by a poisonous, all-consuming doubt. He looked at Julian, then back at Sloane. The question didn't need to be asked. It was etched into every tense line of his body. "It's yours, Leo. Of course it's yours," Sloane rushed to say, her voice skidding with a frantic need to convince him. "We were trying, remember? It's your baby. I swear." but the oath was worthless. A hollow sound. The seed of mistrust, once planted, had become a strangling vine. The fact that she had hidden the pregnancy until this moment of utter desperation was proof enough that something was deeply wrong. She hadn't shared the joyful news with her husband. She was using it as a shield, a weapon of last resort emotional blackmail. Julian, for his part, had gone deathly pale. He looked from Sloane to her flat stomach. Then to me. His expression was a nauseating cocktail of shock, confusion, and abject fear. His affair, his secret, careless indulgence had just acquired a complication he had never, ever imagined. A child. Maybe his child, growing in the womb of another man's wife, while his own wife carried his legitimate heir. The sick, twisted symmetry of it was enough to make me feel physically ill. Leo said nothing more. He looked one last time at the crying woman in the bed, then at the man who had helped him ruin his life. There was a final, bitter acceptance in his eyes, the understanding that nothing could be salvaged from these ruins. He turned around, his body moving with the stiff, heavy movements of a man decades older, and walked toward the door. He passed me without a glance, but for a single, heart-wrenching second, his shoulders sagged, and I felt the immense, crushing weight of his shared pain. Then he was gone, leaving behind the silence and the wreckage of 4 lives. In the room remained the 3 of us, the toxic triangle now fully exposed in all its sordid glory. Sloane sobbing quietly, the fight gone out of her. Julian staring into the void, his broken wrist the least of his injuries. And me. I finally moved. I walked slowly to Julian's bedside. He lifted his eyes to me. A plea evident in their bloodshot depths. "Laura, please, forgive me. Let me explain." I looked down at him, not with hatred, but with a kind of detached, clinical curiosity, as if you were a specimen of a species I no longer understood. "Explain what?" "Julian," I asked, my voice calm, level, and deathly cold. "That you betrayed me? Or that you betrayed me with the neighbor who pretended to be my friend? Or perhaps you want to explain how you had the audacity to do this while I am carrying your son?" My gaze flicked over to Sloane, who flinched under its weight. And now there's this. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried through the room like a shard of glass. "You didn't just break our family. Julian, you shattered it. You took a sledgehammer to everything we were supposed to be. And for what?" I straightened up, my eyes sweeping over the pathetic scene one last time. For someone who is pregnant and doesn't even seem sure who the father is? I didn't wait for an answer. There was no answer that could ever mend this. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving the 2 lovers behind, alone with the ruins of their choices, the echo of my final question hanging in the air between them, a ghost that would haunt them forever. The hospital corridor felt different on the walk back. It was no longer a tunnel of dread, but a path of exile. The fluorescent lights hummed a funeral dirge. And the scent of antiseptic was the perfume of my new, sterilized reality. I didn't look back. There was nothing for me behind that blue curtain but the ghost of a life I had already left behind. I pushed through the heavy glass doors, and the Atlanta night air hit me. A cold, cleansing slap. I breathed it in, deep and sharp, letting the chill burn my lungs and scour the last of the hospital's stagnant air from my body. There were no more tears left to cry. The well was dry, replaced by a resolve as cold and hard as the concrete bench I had sat on earlier. I didn't go to my car. Not yet. I stood in the dim glow of a parking lot lamp, my hands resting on the impossible curve of my belly. My son was quiet now, as if sensing the seismic shift that had just occurred. We were alone, truly, utterly alone. But in that solitude, I felt a power I hadn't known I possessed. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the brutal, necessary demolition that had to happen before I could build something new, something strong, something that belonged only to us. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and shadows. My mind wasn't on the road. It was in the future, already drafting blueprints from the ashes. The apartment, our home, was now a crime scene. Every memory was tainted, every object a co-conspirator in the lie. I walked through the door I had slammed shut in a panic hours before, and the silence that greeted me was accusatory. My eyes went straight to the nursery. The door was still ajar, and from where I stood, I could see the edge of the yellow onesie on the floor, a symbol of innocence, now lying in the dust of betrayal. I walked toward it, my steps echoing in the emptiness. I didn't go inside. I stood at the threshold, my hand on the door frame, and I looked at the half-finished room, the unpainted wall, the unassembled crib, the boxes of diapers. This was not a room of joy anymore. It was a project, my most important project. I left the onesie where it lay, a reminder. In the living room, I didn't turn on the main lights. I clicked on a single lamp, casting long, dramatic shadows. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady. And I sat on the sofa. I looked at the space where Julian's favorite chair sat. I imagined him in it, laughing, telling me about his day. All of it a performance. The anger tried to rise then, a hot, bitter tide, but I pushed it down. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was chaotic, unproductive. I needed clarity. I needed a plan. My phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't need to look to know it was him. Julian. The sedative would have worn off completely by now. He would be desperate, panicked, scrambling to control the narrative. The buzz was insistent, a frantic insect trapped in leather. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, it buzzed again. A text. I didn't read it. I stood up and went to our home office. His office, really. I turned on the computer. The glow of the monitor illuminated my determined face in the dark room. I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed 2 words: Operation Phoenix. It started with a list. 1. Lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark. A cold, efficient, brilliant shark who specialized in dissecting wealthy. Unfaithful husbands. I needed someone who wouldn't flinch, who would see this not as emotional tragedy, but as a tactical problem to be solved. I began a search, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Compiling names, reading reviews, noting accolades. I would call the top 3 at 9:01 a.m. 2. Finances. Julian handled most of our money. I had access, of course, but I'd never paid close attention. That ended tonight. I logged into our joint banking and investment accounts. I took screenshots. I downloaded statements. I documented every asset, every liability. I was no longer a partner. I was an auditor. I needed to know what was mine, what was his, and what I could secure for my son before Julian could hide or squander it. 3. Real estate. This apartment was poisoned. Every corner whispered Sloane's name, echoed with Julian's lies. We couldn't stay here. I opened a new tab and started searching for short-term rentals. A furnished apartment, maybe in Decatur or Virginia Highland. Somewhere neutral, anonymous. A bunker where I could plan the next move without the ghosts of my old life breathing down my neck. 4. Moving. I found the website for a reputable, discreet moving company and bookmarked it. I wouldn't take everything. Just my things, the baby's things, the items that were truly mine. I would leave his life in boxes for him to sort through. I worked for hours, the blue light of the screen my only companion. The methodical nature of the tasks was a balm. Each clicked link, each saved file was a brick. I was laying in the foundation of my new life. I was no longer a Laura, the betrayed wife. I was a Laura, the architect. As the first hint of dawn tinged the sky a pale gray. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Julian. The name on the screen sent a fresh jolt through me. Leo Mercer. I stared at it. What could he possibly want? To commiserate? To blame me? I let it ring. My heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The call went to voicemail. A moment later, a text notification popped up. Leo, I need to see you. It's important. Not about them, about us. Us. There was no us. There was only the shared crater left by the same explosion. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My focus was a fragile thing, and his pain was a gravitational pull I couldn't afford to be sucked into. I had my own path to walk, my own son to protect. I finally stood, my body stiff and aching. I went to our bedroom, the bedroom, and looked at the bed we had shared. The comforter was still rumbled from this morning. A lifetime ago. I couldn't sleep there. I wouldn't. I walked to the closet and pulled a fresh set of sheets from the linen cupboard. I made up the bed in the guest room, the movements robotic, precise. This would be my room now, a temporary holding cell until I could claim my freedom. As I lay down in the unfamiliar bed, the exhaustion finally claimed me. But my mind wouldn't quiet. It replayed the scene in the hospital, not with the raw pain of before, but with the analytical eye of a strategist. Sloane's face when she saw Leo, the terror, the desperation, the pregnancy, a new chilling thought crystallized in the dark. This wasn't just about affair. This was about legacy, about bloodlines. If that child was Julian's, then my son had a half-sibling, a rival, a complication that would forever tie me to Sloane, to Leo, to this tangled, sordid mess. Julian's betrayal wasn't just of our marriage. It was a potential betrayal of our son's birthright. A dilution of his inheritance, both emotional and financial. The cold resolve inside me hardened into something fiercer, more protective. I would not let that happen. I would build a fortress around my child so strong, so impenetrable, that none of the fallout from this disaster could ever touch him. My hand found its way to my belly. He was still, sleeping. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered into the silence, "and I will move heaven and earth to make sure you have everything you deserve." Everything he tried to take from you. The first thing he had tried to take was a stable home, and that was the first thing I would reclaim. When the sun finally rose, proper and bright, I was already awake, already dressed in a simple, severe black outfit. I was seated at the kitchen island, a cup of herbal tea steaming beside my laptop. At 8:55 a.m., I picked up my phone. My hand was perfectly steady. I dialed the number for the first lawyer on my list. A woman named Beatrice Vance, known in legal circles as the Vulture. She answered on the second ring. Beatrice Vance, a crisp, no-nonsense voice stated, "Ms. Vance," I said, my voice clear and devoid of tremor. "My name is Alara Thorne. I believe my husband, Julian Thorne, is attempting to hide marital assets. I need to file for divorce, and I need to do it yesterday." There was a brief pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the sharpening of claws. "Tell me everything." "Mrs. Thorne," Beatrice Vance said, "and leave nothing out." And so I began. I laid out the facts, cold and clean, like a surgeon presenting a case. The accident, the other woman, the pregnancy, the financial records I had already gathered. I was not a heartbroken woman. I was a client, providing a briefing. When I finished, there was another pause, this one filled with a palpable sense of professional glee. "Mrs. Thorne," she said, "it sounds like you've already done half my job. Come to my office at noon. We have a great deal to discuss." I hung up the phone and allowed myself a small, cold smile. The first move had been made. The demolition was over. The construction was about to begin. The silence in Beatrice Vance's office was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the hollow, aching silence of my apartment, nor the chaotic, beeping silence of the hospital. This was a rich, expensive silence, absorbed by plush carpets and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal tomes. It was the silence of power, of calculation, and I found it immensely comforting. Beatrice Vance, call me B, she'd said. Though her demeanor suggested she was anything but casual, was a woman in her late 50s with a razor-sharp bob of silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from me, her hands steepled, listening as I laid out my case for the second time that day. I handed her the manila folder I had prepared that morning. Printed bank statements, the screenshot of the hospital admission form with Sloane's name. A timeline I'd sketched out of Julian's suspicious behavior. She scanned the documents, her expression unchanging. When I finished, she placed the folder neatly on her immense mahogany desk. You are an exceptionally prepared client. Elara, she said, her voice as smooth and cool as polished stone. That will make this process significantly more efficient. Efficiency is what I want, I replied, my hands resting on my belly. Not drama. Not revenge. A clean, swift, and thorough dissection of our shared life. B gave a curt nod. Revenge is an emotional luxury that often costs clients a great deal of money. What you're describing is justice. And justice, in my experience, is best served cold, with precise financial documentation. She leaned forward slightly. The infidelity is regrettable, but from a legal standpoint, it's the financial misconduct that truly interests me. You mentioned your suspicion that he is attempting to hide assets. He's a partner at a prestigious firm, I said. There are bonuses, investment vehicles, offshore accounts he's alluded to that never fully disclosed. I've always trusted him. That was my mistake. Trust is not a legal requirement, B stated flatly. Full disclosure is. We will file an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order to freeze all joint assets and prevent him from dissipating any marital property. Given the circumstances, your advanced pregnancy, the evidence of his affair, a judge will likely grant it. He will be served before the end of the day. The finality of her words sent a thrill of cold satisfaction through me. It was beginning. The legal machinery was grinding to life, and I had just thrown the first stone into its gears. There is another matter, I said, my voice lowering slightly. The other woman, Sloane Mercer. She is pregnant. B's eyebrows lifted a fraction of a millimeter. I see. And the paternity? Unknown. Her husband, Leo Mercer, has demanded a test. But the possibility exists that the child is Julian's. That complicates things, but it doesn't fundamentally change our strategy, she mused, making a note on a pristine legal pad. If the child is his, it establishes a second claim on his financial resources, which could impact long-term support calculations. We will treat it as a potential liability. Our goal remains the same, to secure the maximum possible settlement for you and your child, ensuring your financial independence and future security. Security. The word resonated deep within me. That was all I wanted now, a fortress of security for my son and me. Good, I said, standing up. The meeting was over. We had a plan. I'll be moving out of the marital home today. I'll send you the new address. Prudent, be acknowledged, also rising. Create distance. Physical distance is excellent leverage. And Alara, she added, her gaze softening for the briefest moment, do not speak to him. Direct all communication through me. Any plea, any apology, any threat, it all comes to me. Your only job is to take care of yourself and that baby. Let me be the wolf at the door. I left her office feeling lighter, armed with a purpose that was more potent than any emotion. I had a wolf on my side, and I was learning to howl. Back at the apartment, the movers I'd hired were already waiting. Two burly, silent men who asked no questions. I directed them with a calm authority that surprised me. This sofa, my desk, all the contents of this room, I said, standing in the nursery. I would not let the poison of this place taint my son's first days. Every stuffed animal, every blanket, every piece of the beautiful cherrywood crib we had chosen together, it was all going. As the men worked, wrapping furniture in padded blankets, my phone lit up again. Julien. This time, he left a voicemail. I couldn't help myself. I pressed play, holding the phone to my ear as I supervised the packing of my son's future. Alara, please, God, please pick up. His voice was ragged, thick with what sounded like genuine tears. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. It was a moment of insanity, a weakness. It didn't mean anything. You and the baby, you're my entire world. Please, just talk to me. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything. I deleted the message. His words were like smoke, insubstantial and easily dispersed. A moment of insanity that had lasted for months. A weakness that had involved shared secrets and intimate car rides. It didn't mean anything, yet it had meant enough to risk everything. His apology was just another lie, crafted to lure me back into the labyrinth of his deceit. An hour later, the essentials were loaded into the moving truck. I did one last walkthrough of the apartment. It looked wounded, with blank spaces on the walls and ghostly outlines on the floor where furniture used to be. I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, looking at the empty closet, my side stripped bare, his still full. A metaphor for our marriage. I didn't feel a thing. My final act was to place the manila envelope on the glass coffee table. The only piece of furniture left in the living room, inside, as I'd promised myself, were 3 items: the accident report, the latest ultrasound photo, and the note. While you were lying, I learned to live. I didn't sign it. He would know. I locked the door behind me for the last time and followed the moving truck to my new, temporary home, a sleek, modern apartment in a high-rise indicator. It was impersonal. A blank slate with a stunning view of the city skyline. As the movers arranged my belongings, a sense of profound peace settled over me. This space held no history. It held only potential. Later that evening, as I sat on my new sofa eating takeout, My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew. It's Leo. I know you're ignoring me. I don't blame you. But this isn't about sympathy. I have a proposal, a business proposition. It's about our sons. Our sons. The phrase was a seismic shock. He was already thinking in those terms, already building a future from the rubble in a way I hadn't even considered. A business proposition? My instinct was to delete it, to block the number, to build my fortress walls even higher. But something made me hesitate. B's words echoed in my mind. Treat it as a potential liability. Or perhaps a potential asset. Leo wasn't my enemy. He was a variable. And a smart architect always accounts for every variable. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete the message either. I saved the number. I needed to consult my wolf. Before I made any move, I needed to know if this was a threat or a tool I could use. The game had changed. The pieces were moving, and for the first time since the phone rang at 3:14 p.m., I was the one controlling the board. The silence in my new apartment was a living thing. It wasn't the heavy, grief-stricken silence of the old place, but a clean, empty quiet, waiting to be filled with new sounds. The movers had left. Boxes were stepped against the bare walls, a chaotic cityscape of my former life. I stood in the center of the living room, the city lights of Decatur twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. And I breathed. For the first time in days, the air didn't taste like lies. Leo's text glowed in my mind. A business proposition. It's about our sons. The audacity of it was staggering. While I was meticulously building my fortress, he was already sketching blueprints for a bridge. I felt a surge of resentment. How could he think about alliances when the embers of our lives were still so hot? My hand went to my belly, a familiar anchor. Our sons. He had said it with such certainty, as if the future was already written. I couldn't deal with him. Not yet. I had my own battle plans to draw. I unpacked the nursery first, my movements methodical, almost ceremonial. I assembled the crib myself, my pregnant belly making it an awkward dance of angles and determination. Every twist of the screwdriver, every snap of the fitted sheet was a declaration. I can do this alone. The room began to take shape. A sanctuary of soft grays and whites, untouched by the fingerprints of betrayal. My phone, now a tool rather than a source of anxiety, buzzed with an email from B. The subject line was simple. TRO granted. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. The temporary restraining order was in place. Julian's access to our money, our investments, was frozen. The wolf had bitten. I could only imagine his panic, his fury. A man who controlled everything was now locked out of his own financial life. It was the first concrete victory, and it tasted like ice water. The rest of the day was a blur of domestic logistics. Setting up utilities, ordering groceries, creating a new life line by line from scratch. It was exhausting, but it was a clean exhaustion. The the kind that comes from building, not from falling apart. As dusk fell, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange, my doorbell rang. My heart stuttered. It was too early for Julian to have found me. B had ensured the new address was sealed. Cautiously, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. Leo Mercer stood in the hallway. He looked older, the lines on his face etched deeper than I remembered. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, and in his hands, he held a small potted orchid, its delicate white blooms a stark contrast to the grim determination on his face. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me not to open the door, to preserve the sanctity of my new, sterile space. But another part of me, the cold, calculating architect, was curious. What could he possibly want that was important enough to track me down? I unlocked the door and opened it a few inches. The chain still fastened. Leo, Ilara. His voice was calm, but there was a raw intensity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I know I'm the last person you want to see. I will come in. I just talk to you for a moment. I needed to give you this. He held up the orchid, a housewarming gift, for a new beginning. I didn't move to take it. That's not why you're here. A fate-weary smile touched his lips. No, it's not. He took a deep breath. The DNA test came back. The baby, Sloane's baby, it's mine. The news landed with a quiet thud. Not Julian's. The immediate selfish rush of relief was so powerful it shamed me. My son would not have a rival. The tether to Sloane was severed. I'm glad for you, I said, the words feeling hollow. It doesn't change what she did, he said, his gaze unwavering. It just changes the landscape. He shifted his weight. Which is why I'm here. My proposal. He looked down the empty hallway, then back at me. His voice dropping. My son is going to be born into a broken home because of your husband. Your son is going to be born without a father present for the same reason. I can't change that, but I can change what comes next. He leaned a shoulder against the door frame, his posture not threatening, but earnest. I don't want to be a substitute father, Ilara. I know I'm not his, but I can be a father figure. I can be a stable, honest man in his life. I can teach him things, be there for his birthdays, help him with his homework. And in return, he paused, his eyes searching mine. Your son can be a brother to mine. They are the only innocent ones in all of this. They're linked by this history, this tragedy. Maybe they don't have to grow up in the shadow of it. Maybe they can grow up in the light of a new family, a strange, patched together one, sure, but a family. The world tilted. His words were so far outside the realm of anything I had considered. A shared custody of our children's lives? It was madness. It was unprecedented. It was profoundly, terrifyingly logical. I stared at him, my mind racing, trying to find the flaw, the hidden angle. You're suggesting we, what? Co-parent? Our children who aren't siblings together? I'm suggesting we don't let the poison of their parents' mistakes infect their futures, he said, his voice gaining strength. I'm offering an alliance, a partnership. We pool our resources, not just money, but time, attention, stability. We give them a bigger, stronger foundation than either of us could alone. Your son gets a positive male role model. My son gets a brother. We give them both a buffer against the chaos their parents created. He finally held out the orchid again. This time, I unfastened the chain and took it. The pot was cool and smooth in my hands. I'm not doing this out of pity for you, he said, his tone firm. I'm doing it for them, and maybe a little for us. We're the ones who have to clean up this mess. We might as well do it together. He didn't wait for an answer. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the bomb he had just dropped in my hallway, and turned to leave. Think about it, he said over his shoulder. Talk to your lawyer. My proposal is serious. I closed the door slowly, my back against the cool wood. The orchid held to my chest. Its delicate scent was a whisper of life in my sterile new home. I looked around at the boxes. The blank walls, the empty crib waiting in the other room. I had been so focused on building walls. Leo was proposing we build a bridge. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard, and for the first time since the world ended. It felt like a seed of hope, fragile and improbable, had been planted in the ashes. The orchid sat on my new kitchen counter, its delicate white blooms a silent, confounding accusation. It was a symbol of life, of elegance, of a future I had not planned for. Leo's words echoed in the stillness of the apartment, a persistent, low-frequency hum beneath the quiet. A partnership, an alliance, a family. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. My first instinct, honed sharp by betrayal, was to reject it, to see it as another form of entanglement, a Trojan horse that would let the chaos of his life and Sloane's back into the pristine fortress I was building. I had my lawyer, my plan, my independence. That was the clean, straight path. But as I moved through the next day, unpacking boxes and assembling a bookshelf, my son tumbling restlessly inside me, Leo's logic began to seep through the cracks in my resolve. They are the only innocent ones. He was right. My child would grow up without a father. I could give him love, stability, every material thing he needed, but I could not give him a father's perspective, a father's roughhousing play, a father's unique brand of quiet strength. I had uncles, male cousins, but it wasn't the same. It was a hole, a void that Julian's actions had carved out of my son's life. And Leo's son? He would be born into a world of acrimony and resentment. His mother was a woman capable of breathtaking deceit. His father, while wronged, would be grappling with his own deep wounds. What kind of foundation was that? The cold, calculating part of my brain? The part that had impressed Beatrice Vance? began to analyze Leo's proposition not as an emotional plea, but as a strategic merger, two separate entities, both weakened by a shared catastrophic event, pooling resources to create a stronger, more resilient whole. It wasn't about romance or even friendship. It was about survival. It was about giving our children an advantage. That evening, I called B. I laid it out for her, my voice clinical, stripping the emotion from the scenario as I had learned to do. Leo Mercer has proposed a co-parenting arrangement, I stated. His son and my son, raised in a collaborative, platonic partnership, shared time, shared resources. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her sharp mind. That is highly unorthodox, she said finally. The legal ramifications are a labyrinth. It's not a recognized familial structure. I understand that, I replied. But from a purely strategic standpoint, if he is serious, it could provide a significant stability argument in our custody and financial negotiations with Julian. It demonstrates that I am not a single mother facing an uncertain future, but part of a stable relationship. Two-parent household, albeit a non-traditional one. B let out a soft, appreciative breath. You're learning quickly, Alara. You're right. A judge would look favorably on a demonstrated, robust support system. It undermines any argument Julian might make about your ability to provide a stable home alone. She paused. But the risks are substantial. You would be legally and emotionally tethering yourself and your child to this man and his family. If this alliance fractures, the fallout could be messier than your divorce. I know, I whispered, the weight of it settling on me. Draw up a proposal, Bia said, her tone all business now. A non-binding memorandum of understanding. Outline everything. Financial contributions, time-sharing, decision-making hierarchies, dispute resolution mechanisms. Treat it like a business contract. If he balks at any of it, you'll have your answer about his sincerity. A business contract for a family. It was the most cynical and yet most sensible thing I had ever heard. I spent the next 2 days at my laptop, not unpacking, but drafting. I created a document titled Co-Parenting Partnership Agreement. It was dry, precise, and thorough. It stipulated that we would maintain separate residences, but find a neutral third location, a house, to purchase together within a year, with financial contributions proportional to our incomes. It outlined a schedule for shared meals, holidays, and vacations. It detailed how major decisions about the children's health and education would be made. It included a clause for mediation if we disagreed. I was building the blueprint for a bridge, and I was building it out of legal paragraphs and financial projections. When it was done, I emailed it to Leo. I didn't call. I didn't text. I sent the document and waited. My heart a frantic drum against my ribs. His reply came within an hour. It was just 2 words. I'm in. A week later, we met in person. Not in a cozy cafe, but in a sterile conference room at B's law firm. It was a deliberate choice to keep this in the realm of the professional. Leo arrived looking tired but resolute. He shook B's hand, then mine, his grip firm and warm. We went through the document, line by line. B was a pit bull, grilling him on his financial stability, his long-term intentions, his capacity to follow through. What happens if you reconcile with your wife? B asked, her voice like chipped ice. Leo didn't flinch. There will be no reconciliation. The divorce is underway. My commitment is to my son and to this partnership with Alara. He looked at me. Sloane will be his mother. She will have her role. But this is separate. This is about creating a new normal for him and for Ilara's son. He agreed to every one of my terms. He even added a few of his own about setting up a joint educational trust fund for both boys. There was no hesitation, only a steady, determined focus. He wasn't doing this on a whim. He had thought it through as carefully as I had. After 2 hours, we had a document we could all live with. It wasn't legally binding. Not yet, but it was a statement of intent, a covenant. As we stood to leave, Leo turned to me. "There's something I want to show you," he said, "if you have time." Curiosity, a feeling I had almost forgotten, stirred inside me. I nodded. He drove us to a quiet, tree-lined street in a neighborhood called Ormwood Park. He parked in front of a small, slightly worn, craftsman-style house with a wide porch and a large, fenced-in backyard. It had a for sale sign staked in the front lawn. "I'm not suggesting we buy this one," he said, his hands in his pockets as we looked at it from the sidewalk. "It's probably too small. But something like this, a porch for them to play on, a yard, a place with good bones that we can make our own, a real home." I looked at the house, and for the first time, I didn't see a structure. I saw a future. I saw 2 little boys chasing fireflies in that backyard. I saw lemonade on that porch. I saw a life that wasn't defined by the shattering of the old one, but built deliberately, piece by piece. From the wreckage, I didn't smile. I was still too guarded for that. But I felt the cold, hard shell around my heart crack just a little. "It has potential," I said, my voice soft. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the man he must have been before, a flicker of hope in his weary eyes. "That's all we need," he replied. "Potential." We stood there in silence for a long moment. 2 shattered people, looking at a house, imagining a future that was as fragile as it was brave. The blueprint was drawn. Now we had to find the courage to build it. The phantom kicks started that night. Not the gentle, fluttering rolls I had grown accustomed to, but sharp, insistent jabs low in my pelvis. A deep, aching pressure settled into the small of my back, a constant, grinding reminder that the life inside me was running out of room. Out of time, out of patience. My body, which had been a vessel for grief and planning, was now reasserting its primary purpose. The baby was coming, soon. The timing felt like a cosmic joke. just as I had laid the first stone of my new future. A past was demanding its due. This child was a part of Julian, a living, breathing tether to the man I was trying to legally and emotionally excise from my life. Every painful contraction when they began in earnest the next morning. It felt like his final cruel betrayal, forcing me to go through this most primal of journeys alone. I called my obstetrician. I called B, my voice tight, as I instructed her to ensure Julian would be notified of the birth only after it was over, as per my legal rights. And then, my hand hovering over my contacts, I did something I hadn't planned on. I called Leo. He answered on the first ring. "Alara?" "It's time," I said, the words clipped, breathless between a contraction. "The baby. I'm going to the hospital." There was no hesitation. "I'll meet you there." "Which one?" "North Side." The same hospital where it had all fallen apart. The symmetry was not lost on me. I was returning to the scene of the crime to commit an act of creation. When I arrived, the familiar smells and sounds triggered a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with labor. The memory of the blue curtain, ... of Sloane's terrified face, of Leo's shattered expression, threatened to overwhelm me. I closed my eyes, breathing through the pain, focusing on the present. This was different. This was mine. Rio was already in the waiting room. He stood up as I was wheeled in, his face a mask of calm determination. He didn't try to touch me, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just fell into step beside the nurse, a silent, steady presence. "Are you the father?" the nurse asked cheerfully. "No," Leo and I said in unison, our voices firm. "I'm her partner," Leo finished, the word hanging in the air, new and uncharted. The nurse, to her credit, simply nodded and led us to a delivery room. The hours that followed were a blur of pain and surreal focus. Leo was a rock. He fetched ice chips, held my hand during the worst of the contractions, his grip strong and reassuring. He spoke in a low, calm voice, not the frantic panic chatter I imagined Julian would have offered. He was a grounded, practical force in the storm of my labor. "There's a system to this," he murmured at one point as I panted through a particularly vicious wave. "It's just physics. It's pressure and release. You're doing the work. Just let your body do what it knows how to do." His words, so different from the emotional pandering I expected, were exactly what I needed. He wasn't treating me like a fragile victim. He was treating me like an engineer facing a complex but solvable problem. We were a team, dismantling the old structure to make way for the new. When the moment came to push, the world narrowed to a single burning point of existence. All the betrayal, the anger, the meticulous plans, they all fell away. There was only the monumental effort, the primal urge, and Leo's unwavering voice in my ear. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, Alara. Now, push." And then a final, searing release. And a sound that shattered the universe and put back together again. A cry a fierce, indignant, healthy wail. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. They placed him on my chest, a slippery, wriggling, perfect being with a shock of dark hair and eyes squeezed shut against the bright new world. The love that flooded me was so immediate, so violent, so all-consuming that it stole the air from my lungs. This was my son, my Alexander, my everything. I looked up at Leo, tears I didn't know I had left streaming down my face. He was looking down at Alexander, his own eyes shimmering, a look of awe and fierce protectiveness on his face. In that moment, the business proposition, the alliance, it all melted away. This was real. This was a child. Our children would be brothers. We were moved to a recovery room, a quiet, dim space where the world felt soft at the edges. Alexander, swaddled tightly, slept in my arms. I was exhausted, euphoric, and utterly spent. Leo sat in the chair beside the bed, a silent sentinel. The peace was shattered by a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices. One of them was horribly familiar. "You can't keep me from my son. I'm his father." Julian. My blood ran cold. I held Alexander tighter. Leo was on his feet in an instant, his body blocking the door. "Stay here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. I could hear them, their voices a tense, hissed argument, just beyond the threshold. "You have no right to be here, Thorn," Leo snarled. It was a sound I had never heard from him before. Pure, unadulterated fury. "This is my wife and my child. Get out of my way, Mercer. This is none of your business." "Oh, it became my business when you decided to sleep with my wife," Leo shot back, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You forfeited your right to be here the moment you chose to betray her. You think you can just swan in now for the happy ending? After what you did to her? Look at you. You're not a father. You're a sperm donor who caused a car accident. You think you can replace me?" Julian's voice was shrill, cracking with desperation and rage. "You're just her pathetic, cuckolded neighbor. This is my family. Your family is in ruins because of you." Leo's voice was like ice now, cold and sharp enough to cut. "And I am not trying to replace you. I'm trying to protect them from you. Now, you can leave quietly, or I can have security escort you from the premises. Your choice. But you are not setting foot in this room." There was a long, tense silence. I could picture them, standing chest to chest in the fluorescent hallway. Two men whose lives had been irrevocably broken and remade by the same woman's deceit. One was a ghost, screaming to be let back into a house that had already been demolished. The other was the foreman on the new construction site, guarding the foundation with his life. I heard a muttered curse from Julian, then the sound of retreating, furious footsteps. Leo came back into the room, his shoulders tense, his jaw clenched. He took a deep, steadying breath, and his expression softened as he looked at me and the baby. "He's gone," he said simply. In that moment, as I looked at Leo standing guard over my newborn son and me. Something fundamental shifted inside me. A final thread of any lingering feeling I had for Julian, pity, nostalgia, even hatred, snapped. He was nothing, a phantom, a nuisance. Leo had not just been my partner in a business arrangement. He had been my shield. He had faced down the ghost of my past and banished it, not for his own sake, but for mine, for Alexander's. I looked down at my son's perfect, sleeping face, then back at Leo. The blueprint we had drawn in a lawyer's office was no longer just a document. It was a vow, written not in ink, but in the fierce protective light in a good man's eyes. The breaking was over. The building of our strange, beautiful, patched-together family had truly begun. The first week home with Alexander was a hazy, beautiful delirium. The world existed in 3-hour increments, measured by his soft, hungry cries and the slow arc of the sun across the floor of my new apartment, the sharp edges of my anger, the cold calculations of my plans, all softened in the face of his utter dependence. He was a tiny, warm universe in my arms, and my only purpose was to keep that universe safe and whole. Leo was true to his word. He didn't try to intrude, but he was a constant, steady presence. He arrived each morning at 9, his knocks soft and predictable. He never came empty-handed. One day it was a bag of groceries stocked with easy, one-handed meals. Another day, it was a stack of books on infant sleep patterns, which he read with the focus of a student cramming for a final exam. He didn't offer unsolicited advice. He simply observed, learned, and helped. His help was practical, tangible. "I'm going to run the dishwasher," he'd announce, or "I'll take this laundry down to the building's machines." While Alexander slept, he assembled a rocking chair I hadn't had the strength to tackle. His brow furrowed in concentration. He was building the physical infrastructure of our new life, one screw, one clean onesie at a time. One afternoon, as I nursed Alexander in the living room, bleary-eyed and still in my pajamas, Leo sat on the floor, quietly organizing a chaotic drawer of baby supplies. He held up a tiny, impossibly small sock. "It's astounding how much stuff such a small person requires," he murmured, a faint smile touching his lips. "It's like gearing up for a very delicate promise." Very loud expedition, a real laugh, rusty and unexpected, bubbled out of me. "The expedition is to the land of occasionally sleeping. It's a treacherous journey." He looked up and his smile widened, reaching his eyes. It was the first time I had seen genuine, unburdened warmth there since the hospital. In that moment, he wasn't the betrayed husband or my strategic partner. He was just Leo, a man amused by a tiny sock. That small, shared laughter felt more significant than any signed document. It was the first brick laid in the foundation of our friendship. A few days later, the outside world intruded in the form of a thick, legal envelope from Beatrice Vance. Julian was contesting the temporary restraining order and fighting for shared custody. He was using my unstable living situation and questionable new relationship as leverage. B's cover letter was terse. He's swinging wildly. Don't worry, we're prepared. I showed the letter to Leo after he'd finished washing the breakfast dishes. He read it, his expression grim. Questionable new relationship. He read aloud. His voice flat. He looked at me, then at Alexander sleeping at his bassinet. He doesn't get it, does he? This isn't about him anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. He's trying to control the narrative, I said. The old, cold feeling creeping back in. He can't stand that I've moved on without his permission. Leo folded the letter and handed it back to me. Then we give the court a new narrative, a better one. He pulled out his phone. The house on Ormwood Park. It's still for sale. My realtor says there's been little interest. We should go see it. Today. Today? I looked down at my milk-stained shirt, at the sleeping newborn. Leo, I can't just... We can, he insisted. His voice, gentle but firm. We'll bundle Alexander up. It'll take 20 minutes. We need to show the court and ourselves that this is real, that we're not just two people hiding in an apartment. We're a family, building a home. The audacity of it was breathtaking. But he was right. It was time to move from planning to action. An hour later, the three of us stood on the porch of the Craftsman house. Leo held Alexander's car seat carrier, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Brenda, unlocked the door and ushered us inside. The house was empty, sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It smelled of old wood and possibility. It was smaller than our old apartment, but it felt solid. The living room had a fireplace. The kitchen was dated, but spacious. And the backyard, it was a fenced-in square of overgrown grass and a massive, ancient oak tree. I could see it. I could see a swing set under that tree. I could see little boys digging in a dirt patch with sticks. I could see Leo grilling on a patio while I sat on the porch steps, watching our sons chase lightning bugs as the summer twilight faded. I walked over to the large window overlooking the backyard, my hand resting on the cool glass. Leo came to stand beside me, Alexander still sleeping soundly in his carrier. It needs work, he said softly, his gaze also fixed on the yard. Everything worth having needs work, I replied, my voice just as quiet. He turned to look at me. So, what's the verdict, partner? I looked from his hopeful, earnest face to my son's peaceful one, then back to the sun-dappled yard. This wasn't a retreat. It wasn't a fortress. It was a home, a real one. I think, I said, a sense of profound certainty settling over me. This is where our sons should grow up. Leo didn't say anything. He just nodded, a deep satisfaction in his eyes. He shifted Alexander's carrier to his other hand and pulled out his phone, dialing the realtor who was waiting discreetly in the kitchen. Brenda, we'd like to make an offer. As he spoke, I walked to the center of the empty living room and closed my eyes. I could hear the future here. The pitter-patter of small feet, the sound of laughter, a quiet hum of a life built not on a fairy tale, but on choice, on resilience, on a partnership forged in the fires of shared devastation. We were no longer just survivors. We were pioneers, and we had just staked our claim. The paperwork on the house was a welcome distraction, a complex puzzle of offers, counteroffers, and inspections that provided a concrete focus for our shared energy. It was ours, this fledgling dream, a tangible counterargument to the chaos Julian was trying to reignite. We were building, and every signed document was a brick mortared into place. Alexander was 3 weeks old when the first crack in our new foundation appeared. It was a Tuesday. Leo had just left for the evening, and the apartment was steeped in the peaceful, milky quiet of a sleeping infant. The doorbell rang, a shrill sound that made me jump. My first foolish thought was that Leo had forgotten something. I peered through the peephole, and my blood turned to ice. It was Sloane. She stood in the hallway, her face pale and drawn, without its usual artful makeup. She'd lost weight, and her designer clothes hung loosely on her frame. In her arms, she cradled a small woven basket, the kind she used to bring over filled with muffins or scones. The normalcy of it was grotesque. Every cell in my body screamed at me not to open the door. But a cold, furious curiosity held me fast. What could she possibly want? What words could she have left that wouldn't be poison? I unlocked the door and opened it, just enough to block the entrance with my body. I didn't speak. I just stared at her, letting the silence between us swell with all the things that could never be forgiven. Sloane's eyes, wide and pleading, darted past me, searching for a glimpse of the baby. "Ilara," she breathed, her voice trembling. I heard. Congratulations." The word was so profoundly inadequate, it was almost laughable. I said nothing. She swallowed hard, her knuckles white where she gripped the basket. "I know I have no right to be here. I know you must hate me. But I needed to see you, to apologize properly." She held out the basket. Inside, instead of pastries, were tiny hand-knitted booties and a ridiculously soft-looking blanket. A peace offering. A bribe. "Leo told me about the house," she continued, her words rushing out in a nervous torrent. "I think it's amazing. Really. It's so brave what you're doing. Building something new out of all this." She gestured vaguely. "Encompassing the ruin of our lives." My silence seemed to unnerve her further. She shifted her weight, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm getting help, you know. Therapy. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. It was never about you, Ilara. It was my own emptiness, my own sickness." There it was, the classic reframing. It wasn't about you. As if that somehow lessened the violation, as if betraying a friend and dismantling her life while she was pregnant was just a symptom of a personal spiritual crisis. The anger I had kept so carefully locked away began to heat the cold calm inside me. Still, I said nothing. I let her squirm in the space of her own excuses. "I know you and Leo are close now," she said. And I heard the faint, unmistakable edge of jealousy beneath the penitent tone. "And I'm glad he has you, for the baby's sake. But he's still my husband, the father of my child. There's a history there, a bond." Ah, there it was, the real reason for her visit. This wasn't an apology. It was a territorial claim. She saw the alliance Leo and I were building, the new family we were forming, and she felt herself being erased. She had lost her lover and her comfortable life, and now she was watching her husband build a new one with the woman she had wronged. The irony was so thick, I could taste it, metallic and bitter on my tongue. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with manufactured tears. "I just want you to know that I don't blame you for any of it, and I hope one day we can find a way to be in each other's lives. For the sake of the boys. They're going to be brothers, in a way, aren't they?" That was the final straw. The audacity to use our unborn children as a bridge for her own absolution. I finally spoke, my voice low and lethally quiet. "Sloane." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "We will not be in each other's lives," I continued, each word a chip of ice. "You are not welcome here. You do not get to absolve yourself by bringing me booties. You do not get to talk about bonds and history with me. The only connection our children will have is through their father, Leo. That is the boundary. You will stay on your side of it." The tears in her eyes evaporated, replaced by a flash of pure, unvarnished fury. The mask of the contrite sinner had slipped, revealing the cornered predator I had seen in the hospital. "You think you can just cut me out? You think you can take my husband and build your perfect little family, and I'll just disappear?" "I didn't take him," I said, my voice still calm, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "You gave him away. You handed him to me the moment you got into my husband's car. Now you need to leave." For a long moment, we stood locked in a silent battle of wills in the doorway. The friendly neighbor, the betrayed wife, the other woman, all those old, painful identities were gone. We were just two mothers now, fighting for the shape of their children's future. With a sound of disgust, she thrust the basket toward me. I didn't take it. It fell to the floor between us, the tiny booties spilling out onto the clean hallway carpet. "You're not as strong as you think you are, Alara," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "This little fantasy you've built with Leo, it's a house of cards, and I'll be there to watch it fall." She turned on her heel and stalked down the hall, the click of her heels a staccato beat of retreating malice. I closed the door slowly, my hands shaking. I leaned against it, taking deep, steadying breaths. I looked at the abandoned basket on the floor, a symbol of a peace that could never exist. She was wrong. This wasn't a fantasy, and it wasn't a house of cards. It was a house we were building with wood and stone and sheer, stubborn will. And I would be damned if I would let her or anyone tear it down. I picked up my phone and texted Leo. It was only 3 words, but they were heavy with meaning. Sloane was here. The battle lines were now drawn, not just in a courtroom, but on the doorstep of our new life. The war for our future was just beginning. Leo's response to my text was immediate and visceral. He didn't call. He just appeared at my door 20 minutes later. His face a thundercloud, his breathing slightly ragged, as if he'd half run the entire way. "What did she do? What did she say?" he demanded, his gaze scanning me and the apartment, as if checking for damage. I was still holding Alexander, who had woken for a feed. The normalcy of cradling my son while discussing his father's other wife was a surreal dissonance. I nodded toward the woven basket, still lying where it had fallen. She brought a gift. An apology, a warning. I relayed the conversation in a flat, unemotional tone, watching his face darken with each word. When I got to her claim about their bond and her threat to watch our house of cards fall, a muscle in his jaw twitched violently. "She has no right," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "No right to come here. No right to involve you. This is between her and me. It's not, though." "Is it?" I said softly, shifting Alexander to my shoulder. "Not anymore. She sees us as a unit now, a threat. And she's not going to just fade away, Leo. She's going to fight for what she thinks is hers." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from him. "I'll talk to her. I'll make it clear. Talking is what got us here," I interrupted, my voice firmer now. "We need more than words. We need a wall." I looked him dead in the eye. "We need to formalize our agreement. Legally. Not just a memo of understanding. A real, binding co-parenting contract. One that outlines everything, especially her role, or lack thereof." The air in the room shifted. We were no longer just 2 people surviving. We were strategists fortifying a position. "You're right," he said after a long moment, the anger in his eyes cooling into resolve. "We make it ironclad. We protect the boys. We protect us." The next day, we were back in Beatrice Vance's imposing office. This time, the atmosphere was different. It was no longer about defending against Julian. It was about proactively building a legal fortress. Bea listened, steepling her fingers, as we laid out the events of Sloane's visit and our request. "A co-parenting agreement of this nature is pioneering, but not impossible," Bea mused, a glint of professional challenge in her eyes. "We can draft a contract that stipulates financial responsibilities, decision-making hierarchies, and a dispute resolution process. We can even include a right of first refusal clause, meaning if one of you is unavailable for childcare, the other gets the first option before a third party." "Like Miss Mercer is involved. I want it in there," Leo said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I want it explicitly stated that major decisions regarding my son's health, education, and welfare are made jointly by Alara and myself. Sloane will, of course, have her court-mandated visitation and input, but the primary parental partnership is between Alara and me. Hearing him say it with such conviction, such fierce loyalty, sent a shockwave through me. This was no longer a business arrangement. This was a vow. As B began drafting the document, the other battlefront ignited. Julian's lawyer, a slick, condescending man named Mr. Croft, responded to our offer on the house. He argued that the purchase, using funds from what he called the marital estate, was an attempt to dissipate assets and a testament to my irresponsible and impulsive behavior. B handled it with the grace of a scalpel. She provided documentation showing my separate premarital savings I was using for the down payment. She outlined the stability the home would provide for the infant, and she subtly highlighted that Julian's own behavior was the sole reason and alternative. Stable home was necessary. She was a maestro, turning his every attack into a note that played our song. A week later, we sat at my kitchen table, the massive, intimidating document laid out before us. It was dozens of pages long, covering every conceivable scenario, from college funds to what would happen if one of us wanted to relocate. It was unromantic. It was clinical. And it was one of the most meaningful things I had ever read. We signed it without ceremony, the scratch of our pens the only sound in the quiet room. We signed it as Alexander slept in his swing, as the future waited in a vacant house in Ormwood Park. When it was done, Leo looked across the table at me. There, the lines are drawn. They were always there, I said, meeting his gaze. We just made them visible to everyone else. The following day, a process server delivered a copy of the signed agreement to Sloane. We didn't do it to be cruel. We did it to be clear. The message was simple. This is the reality. This is the family we are choosing. Your attempts to destabilize it will be met with the full force of this document. Her response was a torrent of furious, pleading texts to Leo, which he showed me without me asking. How could you? This cuts me out. He's my son. She's poisoning you against me. He didn't engage. He simply replied with one sentence, drafted with B's cool precision. All communication regarding our son will now go through my lawyer, as per our divorce proceedings. This matter is closed. It was the final, definitive line in the sand. We had built our wall. It was made of legal paragraphs and shared purpose, and it was stronger than any lie that had come before it. The outside world could rage against it, but inside, for the first time, we were safe. The scent of fresh paint and sawdust became the perfume of our new life. The Ormwood Park house was no longer a photograph. It was a symphony of chaos and creation. The closing had been a quiet, bureaucratic affair, a stark contrast to the emotional earthquake that had made it necessary. Julian's legal objections had been overruled, the judge noting the clear benefit of a stable home for an infant. We had won that round. The keys were ours. Leo and I stood in the empty living room, the echo of our footsteps bouncing off the bare walls. Alexander was strapped to my chest in a carrier, his wide eyes taking in the strange. New shapes. Leo held a toolbox in one hand and a rolled-up set of blueprints in the other. Not for the house, but for the deck he planned to build in the backyard. "We start with the nursery," I declared. My voice firm. It felt symbolic. We would build our son's world first. For the next 2 weeks, our lives were a whirlwind of manual labor and domestic orchestration. We were a well-practiced team now. I, with Alexander and his carrier or a bouncy seat, would tackle the painting, a soft, calming seafoam green for the nursery, a warm gray for the living room. Leo, with his quiet competence, handled the heavier tasks. He repaired a leaky faucet, rehung doors that stuck, and assembled furniture with a focused patience I admired. We didn't talk much about the past. Our conversations were about the future, spoken in the practical language of creation. "The outlet in the kitchen needs to be GFCI," Leo would say, his head inside a cabinet. "I'll order the blackout curtains for the nursery today," I'd respond, carefully cutting painter's tape along the edge of a window frame. It was during one of these quiet, productive afternoons that my phone rang. I saw Julian's name on the screen and felt a familiar cold dread. I showed the phone to Leo. "Do you want me to answer it?" he asked. His voice calm. I shook my head. I had to do this myself. I had to prove to myself that the ghost no longer held any power. I answered, putting it on speaker and setting the phone on the drop cloth beside me. "Ilara." His voice was different. The bluster was gone, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. I got the papers from your lawyer, the final divorce settlement." I continued rolling paint onto the wall. The steady swish-swish, a calming rhythm. "And you took everything," he whispered, the words choked. "The apartment, half my partnership, the future I built." "No, Julian," I corrected him, my voice even. "You threw it away." I'm just sorting through the pieces that were left. What I'm taking is my son's security, something you clearly had no interest in providing. There was a long silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of his ragged breathing. "I heard you bought a house." "With him?" "We did." He let out a bitter, broken laugh. "So that's it? You just replace me? You move into a picket fence fantasy with the man whose wife you stole?" A hot spike of anger shot through me. But I kept my voice icy. "I didn't steal anyone, Julian. You gave yourself away. And this isn't a fantasy. It's a choice. It's a life we are building with our own hands. Something you would never understand. You only know how to break things." "Ilara, please," he begged, the desperation raw and ugly. "I'm broken. I've lost everything. My job is hanging by a thread. Sloane, she's a mess. It's all a nightmare. Please, can't we just talk? Can't you find it in your heart to..." No, I said, the finality in my tone absolute. There is nothing left to say. My heart belongs to my son now. Don't call this number again. All communication goes through my lawyer. I ended the call. My hand was steady. The room was silent except for Alexander's soft, sleeping breaths against my chest. Leo had stopped working. He was watching me from the doorway, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. Not pity, not triumph, something deeper. Respect. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I looked around the room, at the fresh paint, symbolizing a new beginning, at the tools, representing our shared capability, at my son, the reason for it all. "I'm better than okay," I said, and I meant it. "I'm free." He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Good." He gestured to the wall. "You missed a spot." I laughed then, a real, genuine laugh that felt like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. He picked up a spare brush and dipped it into the paint tray, coming to stand beside me. Together, in comfortable silence, we finished the wall. We were no longer just partners bound by a contract. We were a team, building a fortress not out of fear, but out of hope. The past was a closed door, and we had just painted over it. The house was no longer just a structure. It was a living, breathing entity with its own quirks and demands. We had tamed the chaos of move-in day, and a fragile, hard-won rhythm had settled over our lives. Leo's son, Ben, was born a month after we got the keys, and our strange two-household family began in earnest. The right of first refusal clause in our agreement wasn't just a legal term. It was the bedrock of our days. When Leo had a late client meeting, I picked up Ben from Sloan's and fed him alongside Alexander. When I had a doctor's appointment, Leo took both boys to the park. It worked. It worked so well that sometimes, in the quiet of the evening after both boys were asleep, a treacherous sense of peace would settle over me. It was in one of those moments, sitting on our new sofa with a cup of tea, that the first crack appeared. Leo was in the kitchen, cleaning up from dinner. He'd been quiet all evening, a pensive energy radiating from him that was different from his usual calm focus. "The firm is offering a project," he said suddenly. It's back to me as he scrubbed a pot. A big one. It would mean relocating to Chicago for 6 months, maybe a year. The words landed in the peaceful room like a stone. The teacup felt suddenly cold in my hands. "Chicago," I repeated. The word foreign and threatening. It's a career-defining project, Elora. The kind of thing I've been working toward for a decade. He finally turned around, leaning against the counter, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. The pay would be transformative. The college funds, the mortgage, it would set us up. Us, he said us. But the plan he was describing felt like the opposite of us. It felt like a dissolution. 6 months, I said, my voice carefully neutral. A year. That's not a business trip, Leo. That's moving. We could make it work, he said, stepping into the living room. Long weekends. I'd fly back constantly. You're more than capable of handling things here. And we could hire more help. Hire help? I cut him off, the careful neutrality cracking. Leo, that's not the point. The point is this. I gestured around the room, at the walls we had painted, at the faint sound of Alexander's baby monitor. This was the project. This house. This life we're building together. You can't be the co-architect if you're in a different time zone. He flinched, but his jaw set. This is an incredible opportunity for all of us. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd be supportive. Supportive of you leaving. The hurt was rising now, hot and sharp, so different from the cold betrayal I'd felt with Julian. This was worse, because I had let myself rely on him. This isn't about support. Leo, it's about commitment. We signed a contract. We built a nursery. We bought a house with a yard for them to play in together. Was that all just convenient for you until something better came along? The moment the words left my mouth, I knew they were unfair. But the fear was a live wire in my chest. The fear of being left again. The fear that this beautiful, improbable structure we had built was just as fragile as Sloane had smeared it was. His face hardened. That's a low blow, Elora. You know it's not like that. This is about securing our family's future. Is it? I stood up, my hands trembling. Or is it about running? This is the first real challenge we faced since we signed those papers. The first time our perfect, pragmatic partnership has been tested. And your solution is to get on a plane? The air between us crackled with the unsaid. This was our first real fight. It wasn't messy or hysterical like my fights with Julian used to be. It was cold, logical, and it cut deeper because of it. We were two people who had learned to build walls, now accidentally turning them on each other. I'm not running, he said, his voice tight. I'm providing. There's a difference. Is there? I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a profound weariness. From here, it looks exactly the same. I didn't wait for his reply. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving him standing in the living room of the house we had built together. I checked on Alexander, his peaceful, sleeping face, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I then went to the other nursery, where Ben slept just as soundly. I looked at them, these two boys who were the entire reason for this grand experiment. Our alliance was supposed to be their fortress, but tonight it felt like the foundation had developed a hairline fracture. And I was terrified that if we didn't fix it, the whole beautiful, impossible thing would split right down the middle. The silence that fell between Leo and me was colder and heavier than any I had known with Julian. This wasn't the silence of absence. It was the silence of a presence that had turned to stone. We moved around each other in the house with a polite, excruciating efficiency. We still managed the children. Our coordination now a well-oiled but soulless machine. I'll get Alexander. I've changed Ben. The groceries are delivered. The warmth, the shared smiles over a baby's new sound, the easy camaraderie. It was gone, frozen solid by my fear and his ambition. A week into the deep freeze, the first storm hit. Not a metaphorical one, but a real Atlanta spring thunderstorm that tore through the city with a vengeance. The power flickered and died, plunging the house into a deep, roaring blackness. The wind howled like a banshee, and rain lashed against the windows. From upstairs, the cries of two terrified babies cut through the din. Our practiced routine shattered. We met in the hallway, illuminated by the frantic flashes of lightning, both holding a wailing child. "Generator," Leo said, his voice abrupt. "It's in the garage. I think it needs oil," I replied, jiggling Alexander against my shoulder. A tremendous crack echoed outside, followed by a shuddering crash that made the whole house tremble. Both boys screamed louder. In the strobe-like light, I saw the fear on Leo's face. Not for himself, but for them, for us. "To the basement," he commanded. We hustled the children down into the windowless interior room, the air thick and dusty. We settled on an old rug, the boys clutched in our arms, their cries slowly subsiding to whimpers in the oppressive dark. The only light came from my phone flashlight, casting long, dancing shadows. The only sounds were the muffled fury of the storm and our own ragged breathing. For a long time, no one spoke. We were just four people huddled together against the chaos. Then, in the dark, Leo's voice came, quiet and raw. "I'm not him, Ilara." The words hung in the dusty air. He didn't need to say Julian's name. "I know," I whispered, my throat tight. "Do you?" The pain in his voice was unmistakable. "Because when I told you about Chicago, you looked at me like I was handing you another divorce paper. You built this fortress to keep Julian out, but the walls are so high, I'm not sure you even know how to let someone in." The truth of it was a physical blow. He was right. I had been so focused on not being a victim again that I had armored myself against any possibility of being hurt. Even by the person who had done nothing but stand by me. "I'm scared," I admitted, the confession torn from me in the anonymous darkness. It was easier not to see his face. "I'm scared that this is all too good to be true. That if I rely on you, really rely on you, you'll leave. And it will hurt so much more than what he did." Another flash of lightning, and in the brief, stark illumination, I saw him looking at me, his expression not angry, but heartbreakingly sad. "Staying is the whole point, Ilara," he said softly. "Staying through the job offers, through the storms, through the fights. That's what makes it real. Running away to Chicago, you were right." It felt like a solution, but it was just another form of escape. From the complications here, from the fear of failing at this. He gestured between us in the dark. I was scared too. In the profound blackness, with our sons breathing softly against our chests, the crack in our foundation began to mend, not with grand gestures, but with shared vulnerability in a dusty basement. The storm eventually passed. The power hummed back to life, but something fundamental had shifted. We put the boys back to bed, and then we sat at the kitchen table in the bright electric light, and we talked. Really talked. Not as business partners, but as two people who had chosen an impossible path together. We decided together that he would turn down the Chicago project. It wasn't a surrender. It was a mutual affirmation. This here was the project that defined us. A few days later, the second storm arrived. This one was human. Sloane showed up at the door, her face blotchy with tears. Her lawyer had informed her that Leo was filing for full custody, citing the stability of our two-parent household versus what he argued was her increasingly unstable environment. She didn't scream this time. She just looked broken. "You win," she whispered to me, her gaze hollow. "You have my husband, my son. You have it all." Leo stepped up behind me. "No one has won anything. Sloane, this is about what's best for Ben. You're his mother. That will never change. But you need to get stable for him." It was firm but not cruel. It was the truth, spoken by a man who was no longer running from hard things. Watching him, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that our foundation wasn't just repaired, it had been tempered in the storm and was now stronger than ever. We were ready to face whatever came next. Together, the peace we forged in the aftermath of the storm felt earned. A sturdy bridge across the chasm of our first real fight. Leo formally declined the Chicago project, a decision met with a surprising sense of relief from both of us. We had chosen us, and the choice felt more powerful than any promotion. Our days settled back into their rhythm, but the rhythm was richer now, the notes deeper, played with the confidence of a partnership that had been tested and had held. It was a Tuesday. The sun was streaming into the kitchen, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Alexander, now a sturdy toddler with a mop of dark curls, was in his high chair, enthusiastically smearing yogurt everywhere. Ben, a quieter, more observant baby, was contentedly gnawing on a teething ring in his bouncy chair. Rio was packing their diaper bag for a morning at the park, a scene of such normal, domestic bliss that it almost hurt. The doorbell rang. Leo and I exchanged a glance. It wasn't the aggressive ring of a process server or the tentative one of a neighbor. It was neutral. Leo went to answer it. I heard a woman's voice, polite and professional. "I'm looking for Laura Thorne. Can I ask what this is regarding?" Leo's tone was guarded. "I'm here from the Department of Family and Children Services. We've received a report." The world slowed to a crawl. The yogurt on Alexander's face, the sunbeam on the floor, the innocent gurgle from Ben. It all froze. DFCS. The words were a bucket of ice water thrown on our hard-won peace. Leo stepped back, his face pale, and let the woman in. She was middle-aged, with a kind, but unreadable face, and a clipboard held firmly in her hands. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the cheerful chaos. The two children, the two adults who were clearly not a traditional couple. Miss Thorne, I'm Sarah Jenkins. We received an anonymous call expressing concerns about the welfare of the children in this household, specifically regarding the unconventional and potentially unstable living situation. My blood ran cold. Anonymous, I knew with a sickening certainty who it was. Sloane. This was her counterattack. She couldn't win in family court, so she had chosen a more insidious weapon. The visit was a blur of polite, probing questions. She asked about our living arrangements, our financial stability, the nature of our relationship. She asked to see the children's rooms, their food, their medical records. Leo and I answered everything with a calm we had to consciously fabricate, our hands trembling slightly when we thought she wasn't looking. We showed her the immaculate nurseries, the fully stocked pantry, the pediatrician records. We explained our co-parenting agreement, our legal partnership, the stability we had fought to create. We presented a united front. But inside, I was crumbling. This was the one threat I had never anticipated. This wasn't about money or custody. It was an attack on our very right to be a family. The investigator left after an hour. Her expression giving nothing away. "We'll be in touch," was all she said. The door closed, and the silence she left behind was deafening. Leo sank into a chair, his head in his hands. She wouldn't? Sloane wouldn't go this far, would she? "She's desperate," I whispered, my voice shaking. "And we have everything she thinks she's lost." The next few days were an agony of waiting. The shadow of the state hung over our sunny home. Every time the phone rang, we jumped. Every knock at the door sent a jolt of fear through us. We were living in a gilded cage of our own making, terrified that an outsider would deem it unfit. I called Bea Vance. Her fury was a controlled, professional burn. "This is a common tactic in high-conflict cases," she said, her voice like sharpened steel. "We will respond with overwhelming evidence of your stability. We will bury them in paperwork. We will get character references from your pediatrician, your neighbors, your pastors. We will turn this malicious act into proof of your fitness." We did everything she said. We became a factory of respectability. But the fear was a stain that wouldn't wash out. It was the fear that our beautiful, chosen family could be torn apart by a single, poisonous lie. The letter arrived 1 week later. It was on official letterhead. Leo brought it in from the mailbox, his hand trembling. He didn't open it. He just held it out to me. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs. This was it, the verdict on our lives. With a deep breath, I tore it open. My eyes scanned the formal language, searching for the words that would break us. "Investigation is now closed. No evidence of neglect or endangerment found. The household, while non-traditional, appears to provide a stable and nurturing environment. Case dismissed. The paper fluttered from my numb fingers. Leo caught it, his eyes racing over the words. A sound escaped him. A hybrid of a sob and a laugh. He stumbled forward and wrapped his arms around me, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. We stood there in the hallway, clinging to each other, two survivors who had just faced down the greatest threat to their ship and found it. Against all odds, still miraculously afloat, the unseen crack that Sloane had tried to exploit had not broken us. Instead, the pressure had fused us together, stronger and more unbreakable than ever. We had not just been investigated, we had been vindicated. 5 years later, the oak tree in the backyard had seen its share of adventures. Its sturdy lower branches were worn smooth from the grip of small, eager hands, and a tire swing now hung from its strongest limb, a gift from Leo for the boy's 5th birthday. The sound that filled the air on this golden Saturday afternoon was not one of tears or whispered fears, but of unrestrained, joyful shrieks. Alexander, all boundless energy and scraped knees, was chasing Ben around the trunk of the tree. Ben, quieter and more strategic, was deftly dodging, a mischievous grin on his face. They were a study in contrasts. Alexander with his dark, unruly curls, a miniature of the father he never saw. Ben, with his lighter hair and thoughtful eyes, the image of Leo. But in their laughter, in their shared secret language of brotherhood, they were undeniably, beautifully the same. I sat on the back porch steps, a glass of iced tea in my hand, watching them. The ghost of the DFCS investigation, the sharp sting of Sloane's betrayal, the hollow ache of Julian's. They were all distant memories now, faded photographs in an album I rarely opened. They had no place here in the sun-dappled light of this yard. The screen door creaked open, and Leo stepped out. Holding 2 dripping popsicles, he handed one to me and sat down beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. It was a comfortable, familiar contact, the kind built over thousands of shared sunrises, skinned knees. And quiet evenings. Ben's getting faster, I observed, nodding toward the chase. He's going to outmaneuver Alex one of these days. Leo smiled, a deep, contented crinkling around his eyes. He's a strategist. Like his old man, Alex is all heart and momentum. Like his mom, our sons, our boys. The legal documents, the co-parenting agreement, the meticulously drawn lines, they had all melted away into the simple, profound reality of this life. We were not 2 separate entities coexisting. We were a family. Julian had faded into a non-entity, a child support payment that arrived with monotonous regularity, and a birthday card that Alexander glanced at with polite disinterest before running back to his toys, a unit. Sloane was a presence on the periphery, a mother Ben saw on alternate weekends and spoke of with a casual fondness that held no power to wound. She had found a fragile peace, and in doing so, had lost her power to disrupt ours. Leo and I had never married, There had been no grand romance, no sweeping passion. What we had built was something different, something sturdier. It was a deep, abiding love, forged in shared survival. A partnership built on mutual respect, and a friendship that was the bedrock of our entire world. We were the architects and the guardians of this little universe, and it was more fulfilling than any fairy tale. "Remember," Leo said softly, his gaze also on the boys, "when we thought the hardest part was getting through the next hour?" A laugh, easy and light, escaped me. I remember thinking this was a business proposition. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Turns out it was the best investment I ever made. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. We sat in silence for a long while, watching our sons play under the tree we had chosen for them, in the yard we had fenced for them, in the life we had built for them. Alexander, breathless, finally collapsed on the grass, pulling Ben down with him in a giggling heap. They lay there, side by side, looking up at the leaves, their little chests rising and falling in unison. Ben pointed up at the sky. "Look, a cloud that looks like a dragon." "No, it's a spaceship," Alexander countered, his voice full of conviction. Their debate, earnest and ridiculous, was the only sound that mattered. It was the sound of a promise kept, the sound of a home. Leo squeezed my shoulder. "We did good, Ilara." I looked at our sons, at the man beside me, at the garden we had grown from a field of ashes. The past held no power here. It was just fertilizer for the beautiful, resilient, unexpected life we had created. "Yeah," I whispered, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. "We did." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn. But the light inside us, the light we had built together, burned brighter than ever. It was just the beginning. This life isn't the one I planned. It's messy and unconventional and built on a foundation of scars. But it is ours, and it is more powerful, more joyful, and more real than anything I could have imagined. If you're listening to this, if your world has shattered and you're standing in the rubble wondering how you'll ever breathe again, I want you to hear this. The end of one story is never the end of your story. Your pain is not the final chapter. You have a strength inside you that you cannot even fathom yet. You can take those broken pieces and you can build something new, something stronger, something uniquely and beautifully your own. It won't be easy. There will be days that feel impossible, but you can do it. One breath, one step, one brick at a time. Your new life is waiting for you to build it. If this story gave you a flicker of hope, then do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and rebuilding. Share this with one person who might need to hear this message today. And leave a comment below telling me one small thing you're rebuilding in your own life, because every story of survival has the power to light the way for someone else lost in the dark. Thank you for listening. Now go build your beautiful, unexpected life.